Aloha, champions, and welcome back to my library. We're halfway through Sing Down the Moon, and we've got about 6 more videos to go until we're finished with this book. So for today, I'm going to be reading through chapters 13 and 14 of Sing Down the Moon. And you know the drill, we've been working on this so far throughout the year. After you watch Mr. Chambers read the book, you're going to answer 5 to 10 questions on Google Classroom to show what you learned through this reading. So, without further ado, we're on to chapter 13 of Sing Down the Moon. On the first day of Kinadada, 21 relatives and many friends came to our Hogan. Also, Bitterwater, the medicine man, and his singers. My mother dressed me in my best tunic and gave me all her turquoise and silver jewelry to wear. She combed my hair so that it fell loose around my shoulders and tied it in the middle with a string of sacred buckskin. Everyone told me how handsome I looked. My aunt, who was very old and never had been married, said that it was too pretty for any man that she had ever seen. I walked back and forth in front of the Hogan so all of my relatives and friends could see me. I walked there for only a short time because my mother brought 4 sacks of corn from the storehouse and led me to a big grinding stone. The womanhood ceremony lasts 4 days, she said. So we need lots of flour to eat. You are not good at the grinding stone, but now you must put your mind to it and make 4 full sacks of fine meal. In my best clothes and my borrowed jewelry, I knelt and began to grind the corn. I worked for only a short time. My cousin came to me and said, "Wood is scarce." I laid my grinding tool aside and went to the bottom of the orchard and chopped an armload of wood and stacked it in front of the fire. Then I began grinding corn again. After a while, one of the neighbors handed me an empty jar. "Your mother tells me," she said, "that goat's milk is needed." So I jumped up and ran down to the river and found a goat and milked it and brought the jar back. Again, I began to grind the corn. Then my uncle came. "Your aunt wishes a blanket," he said. It went on in such a fashion all that day. Everyone wanted something. Everyone gave me orders. I was flying here and there, and between times I knelt at the grinding stone. This was supposed to make me industrious and obedient, my mother said. During these 4 days, each early morning, I had to run east and south, west and north, as though I was running a race. This was to make me a good runner. Furthermore, I could not eat sweet things, nor anything with salt in it, nor drink too much water, nor was I allowed to scratch myself. And I was told to sleep as little as possible. These things were to make me comely. The 4th morning, male relatives dug a large hole in front of the Hogan and kept a fire burning there all day. Toward evening, when the fire died down, the woman lined the hole with corn husks and poured in a lot of mush, covering it over with more corn husks. At nightfall, we ate some of the corn cake and went into the Hogan, and I sat on the west side across from the door. Then the medicine man sang the 12 songs. The other singers chanted lucky songs about sheep and jewelry and soft goods. They chanted all night. I had to keep awake and listen, or else I would have bad luck. Just before dawn, my mother gave me a basket with water and yucca root in it and helped me to wash my hair. Then as the sun came up, I ran out from the Hogan toward the east, past the orchard and the cornfield, All of the boys ran after me. Even Tallboy did, who still had not gained his strength. We raced to the river and back again, but it was not a real race to see who could run the fastest. For if any of the boys had won, or had beaten me by so much as a step, then they would become old and toothless long before I ever did. I had hoped that Tallboy would not try to run at all, but he was the first to start after me. I ran much slower than I could, hoping that it would help him. This he did not like. He shouted at me to go faster. "You run like an old woman," he cried. I went a little faster and came to the river and floundered around, pretending to slip on the grass bank. "My grandmother runs faster than you," he said. His words made me feel angry, and I began to run as fast as I could and left him far behind. Pale and out of breath, he came in last. The rest of the morning, he went around scowling. I tried to make him smile, but he would not forgive me for running fast, even though he was the one that taunted me to do so. "You do not need to feel sorry about my arm," he said. "It is getting stronger every day." "Soon you will be bending a bow," I answered. "You do not think so, but I will bend many bows before I die," he said. "I think so." "No one thinks so, but I will," he said. That afternoon, when the relatives and friends and the medicine man and his singers had gone, my mother sent me to the field. She gave me a sack of pinto beans and a long pointed stick. Though I was now a woman, I had to work the rest of the day planting seeds. Tallboy rode through the field on his way home, but he did not stop. "You think that I went to the white man's village just to rescue you?" he said as he passed. "You are wrong. I went there for another reason." I watched him right away, sitting stooped in the saddle, one shoulder lower than the other, and my heart went out to him. Chapter 14. The pinto beans pushed up through the earth, and the peaches began to swell. Wool from the shearing was stored away for winter weaving. My father went into the mountains and brought back deer meat, which we cut into strips and dried. It was a good summer and a good autumn. Then, early one winter morning, 3 Long Knives came. They were from the white man's fort, and they brought a message from their chief. When all of our people were gathered in the meadow, one of the soldiers read the message using Navajo words. He read fast, and he did not speak very clearly, but this is what I remember. People of the Navajo tribe are commanded to take their goods and leave Canyon de Chelly. The Long Knife read more from the paper, but all of that I don't remember. Then he fastened the paper to a tree where all in the village could see it, and the 3 soldiers rode away. There was silence after the soldiers left. Everyone was too stunned to speak or to move. We had been threatened before by the Long Knives, but we lived at peace in our canyon. So why should they wish to harm us? Everyone stared at the yellow paper fastened to the cottonwood tree, as if it were alive and had some evil power. Then, after a long time, Tallboy walked to the tree. Grasping the paper, he tore it into many pieces and threw them into the river. We watched the pieces float away, thinking as they disappeared that so had the threat of the white man. But we were wrong. At night, in the dark of the moon, the Long Knives came. The morning of that day, we knew they were coming. Little Beaver, who was tending his mother's sheep, saw them from the high mesa. He left his flock and ran across the mesa and down the trail, never stopping. He fell in front of his mother's hogan, and lay there like a stone until someone threw a gourd of water in his face. By that time, all the people in the village stood waiting for him to speak. He jumped to his feet and pointed to the south. "White men come," he cried. "The sun glints on their knives. They are near." "How many?" Tallboy said. "Many," cried Little Beaver. "Too many." My father said, "We will take our goods and go into the high country. We will return when they are gone." "We will go," said other men. But Tallboy held up his hand and shouted, facing the elder Indians, "If we flee, they will follow. If we flee, our goods will remain to be captured. It is better to stay and fight the Long Knives." "It is not wise to fight," my father said. "No, it is not," my uncle said, and all the other men repeated what was said. It was decided then that we should go, but Tallboy still would not yield. He called to 5 of the young men to join him in the fight. They went and stood by him. "We will need you," my father said to the 6 young men. "We will have to go into the high country. Your strength will help us there." Tallboy was unbending. My father looked at him, at his arm held helplessly at his side. "How is it, Tallboy, that you will fight?" he said. "You cannot string a bow or send a lance. Tell me. I am listening." I watched Tallboy's face darken. "If you stay and cannot fight, what will happen?" my father asked him. "You will be killed, and others will be killed." Tallboy said nothing. It hurt me to watch his face as he listened to words that he knew were true. I left them talking and went down to the river. When I came back, Tallboy had gathered his band of warriors and was gone. We began to pack at once. Each family took what they could carry. There were 5 horses in the village, and they were driven up the Mesa Trail, and they were left there. The sheep and goats were driven a league away into a secret canyon where they could graze. My flock, my 30 sheep, I went there too, with all the rest. I would have gone with them if I had not thought that in a few days the Long Knives would leave and we could come back to our village. I would have never abandoned them. When the sun was high, we filed out of the village and followed the river north, walking through the shallow water. At dusk, we reached the trail that led upward to the South Mesa. Before we went up the trail, the jars were filled with water. We took enough to last us for a week and 5 sheep to slaughter. The cornmeal we carried would last that long. By that time, the soldiers would be gone. Soldiers could not follow our path from the village because the flowing water covered our footsteps as fast as they were made. But when we moved out of the river, our steps showed clear in the sand. And after we were all on the trail, some of the men broke branches from a tree and went back and swept away the marks that we had left. There was no sign for the soldiers to see. They could not tell whether we had gone up the river or down. The trail was narrow and steep. It was mostly slabs of stone which we scrambled over, lifting ourselves from one to the other. We crawled as much as we walked. In places, the sheep had to be carried, and 2 of them slipped and fell into a ravine. The trail upward was less than a half a mile long, but night was falling before we reached the end. We made camp on the rim of the mesa, among rocks and stunted pinyon trees. We did not think that the soldiers would come until morning, but we lighted no fires and ate a cold supper of corn cakes. The moon rose and in a short time shone down into the canyon. It showed the river winding toward the south, past our peach orchards and corrals and hogans, where the tall cliffs ended. Where the river wound out of the canyon into the flatlands, the moon shone on white tents and tethered horses. The soldiers have come, my uncle said. They will not look for us until morning. Lie down and sleep. We made our beds among the rocks, but few of us slept. At dawn, we did not light fires, for fear the soldiers would see the rising smoke, so we ate a cold breakfast. My father ordered everyone to gather stones and pile them where the trail entered the mesa. He posted a guard of young men at the trailhead to use the stones if the soldiers came to attack us. He sent 3 of the fastest runners to keep watch on the army below. I was one of the 3 sent. We crawled south along the rim of the mesa and hid among the rocks, within sight of each other. From where I was crouched behind a pinyon tree, I had a clear view of the soldiers' camp. As the sun rose and shone down into the narrow canyon, I could see the Long Knives watering their horses. They were so far below me that the horses seemed no larger than dogs. Soon afterward, 6 of the soldiers rode northward. They were riding along the banks of the river in search of our tracks. Once they got off their horses, and 2 of them climbed up to Rainbow Cave, where cliff dwellers had lived long ago. But they found the houses deserted. The soldiers went up the river, past the trail that led to the place where we were hidden. They did not return until the sun was low. As they rode slowly along, they scanned the cliff that soared above them, their eyes sweeping the rocks and trees. But they did not halt. They rode down the river to their tents and unsaddled their horses. We watched until they lighted their supper fires. Then we went back to our camp. Tallboy was sitting on a rock near the top of the trail, at work on a lance. He held the shaft between his knees, using his teeth and a hand to rap it with a split reed. I was surprised to see him sitting there, for he and the other young warriors had ridden out of the canyon on the morning the Long Knives came. No one had heard from them since that day. Even his mother and father and sisters, who were hiding with us on the mesa, did not know where he was. At first, I thought he had changed his mind and come back to help protect me. But this was not the reason for his return. Mumbling something that I could not understand, he went on with his work. I stood above him, and as I looked down, I noticed a deep scratch across his forehead, and that a loop of his braided hair had been pulled loose. "Did you hurt yourself climbing the trail?" I said. He knotted the reed around the shaft and bit the ends off with his teeth. His right arm hung useless at his side. "The climb is not difficult," he said. It was a very difficult climb, but I did not say so, since he wanted me to think otherwise. "Where are the warriors?" I asked him. "Are they coming to help us?" "They have left the canyon," he said. "But you did not go," I said, noticing now that he lost one of his moccasins. For an instant, he glanced up at me. In his eyes, I saw a look of shame. Or was it anger? I saw that the young warriors had left him behind with the women and the old men and the children. He was no longer of any use to them. He held up the lance and sighted along the shaft. "It has an iron point," he said. "I found it in the West Country." "It will be a mighty weapon against the Long Knives," I said. "It is a weapon that does not require 2 hands." "One hand or the other," I said. "It does not matter." That night, we ate another cold supper. Yet everyone was in good spirits. The white soldiers had searched the canyon and found no trace of us. We felt secure. We felt that in the morning they would ride away, leaving us in peace. All right, that concludes chapters 13 and 14 of today's reading of Sing Down the Moon. We'll be following up with chapters 15 and 16 on Wednesday. So take some time now to answer those 5 to 10 questions based off of the reading from today, and I will talk to you real soon. Stay awesome.